40 light years from Earth. Something was already awake. Not waiting to destroy us. Waiting to understand us. A living world, searching for another mind. And then we arrived. Xenoforge, the first living planet. It started with a question that answered itself, and the answer was us. 40 light years from Earth, something was already awake, already watching, already counting down the moments until we arrived. Not with dread, not with hunger, but with the kind of patient, aching hope that only something truly cosmically lonely is capable of feeling. It had been waiting longer than our species had existed, longer than our sun had burned, longer than most stars in the sky overhead had been anything more than cold, collapsing clouds of gas drifting in the dark. It had been waiting so long, in fact, that waiting had become something else entirely, something closer to faith. The quiet, unshakable certainty that what you have been searching for will eventually find its way to you. And then, one day, crossing 40 light years of silence and cold and nothing, we did. The crew of the research vessel Horizon had followed a whisper, not a beacon, not a broadcast, a whisper, buried inside magnetic noise so precise, so layered, so deliberately structured that every analysis system on Earth returned the same result when they ran it. This is not natural.
Crew, report. What are we seeing? Commander, strange magnetic signals. They're forming alien patterns. A whisper-like signal from a distant alien world. This changes everything.
It's evolving, sir. We're not alone.
Mission Commander Jax Torres had seen things in 18 years of deep space work that most people back home couldn't process, even when you described them slowly with pictures. He had survived a hull breach at the edge of the solar system. He had spent 11 days alone in a disabled shuttle with a failing oxygen recycler, and come out the other side cracking jokes at the debrief. He did not rattle easily, but when the planet came into view on the main display, he gripped the railing with both hands and didn't say anything for a long time. None of them did, because there are moments when language just gives up and steps aside. Dr. Lena Kaur was the first one down. Her boots touched the surface and sank slightly into soil that was warm. Not the warmth of rock that has been sitting in sunlight. Something else. Something alive and present and aware, the way the air in a room changes when someone walks in who has been waiting for you specifically. She stood still for a moment. She would describe it later in the mission log as feeling recognized, and then she lifted her eyes to the landscape and felt everything she had ever called beautiful quietly revise itself. Crystal spires rose from the ground in sweeping organic curves, each one lit from deep within by slow, rhythmic pulses, not flickering, not random, but deliberate, like breathing, like a mind ticking quietly behind closed eyes. Forests of living glass covered the hillsides, and when the wind moved through them, they sang. Not noise, Not the accidental music on weather, on structure. Actual, resonant, harmonic tones that climbed and fell and circled back on themselves in patterns that felt unmistakably like something trying to remember a song it had known a very long time ago. The plains stretched to every horizon, blanketed in iridescent moss that moved in perfect synchronized waves. Not wind, something underneath, something coordinating it, something thinking. Rivers of liquid light ran upward in slow, graceful spirals, dissolving at their peaks into mist that hung in the air like stars someone had shaken loose from the sky.
And above it all, 3 moons cast overlapping light across a sky painted in colors the human eye was never designed to pass. Colors that registered somewhere behind the eyes, somewhere in the chest, somewhere that doesn't have a name. Lena's voice was barely a sound when it came through the comm. "It's not just alive," she said. She swallowed hard. "It's awake, and I think it knows we're here." She was right. It had known for a very, very long time.
What is this place? It's incredible. I have to get closer. Those crystals are calling to me.
Here is what you need to understand about how life works everywhere else in the universe. On Earth, evolution is slow, achingly, brutally slow. Billions of years of microscopic trial and error, one tiny change at a time, with extinction waiting around every corner for anything that guesses wrong. It is the most patient process in nature, and it still took 4 billion years to produce something complicated enough to look up at the sky and wonder what else is out there.
The world they had landed on worked on a completely different set of rules. The soil, if you could call it that, was saturated with exotic biochemical compounds that didn't behave like chemistry. They behaved like computing. Living quantum processors running in parallel across a planetary scale, sharing information not in years or generations, but in hours. What we call horizontal gene transfer on Earth, the relatively rare ability of bacteria to swap genetic code, happened here between entire ecosystems. Forests shared information with rivers. Mountains communicated with the atmosphere. The very air participated in an ongoing planet-wide conversation that had been running without pause for longer than our solar system had been solid. At the center of it all stood what the crew would come to call the Xenoforge, a colossal living structure rising from the heart of the world like a cathedral grown from the inside out. Massive, ancient, breathing. And for geological age after geological age, it had been doing one thing: running experiments, creating life, discarding it, refining, iterating, searching with the methodical patience of the most advanced intelligence on its world for something it could not manufacture from within itself. A mind from somewhere else. It had not found one, not yet. Years before the horizon arrived, Earth had sent a probe ahead. Standard survey package, cameras, chemical sensors, atmospheric analysis arrays, routine, unremarkable. But carrying, encoded into every algorithm and decision tree and processing protocol, something no one had thought to account for in the mission specs. The fingerprint of a species that asks why. The signature of minds that look at darkness and wonder what's inside it. That build machines to cross impossible distances, not because they have to, but because the not knowing is unbearable. The unmistakable mark of creatures so restless, so relentlessly curious, so terrified of the silence of an empty universe that they will spend everything they have just to hear something answer back. When the probe entered the atmosphere and met the living chemistry of the ground, something in the Xenoforge recognized it, and the experiment it had been running for eons finally found the variable it had been missing. By the time the horizon arrived, the Xenoforge wasn't waiting anymore. It was ready.
The energy readings are off the charts. This changes everything we know. I have to get closer.
The anomalies started the first night, quiet and strange and almost gentle. Lena had noted the moss growing on the landing struts within 20 minutes of touchdown, standard biological colonization. She logged it and moved on. But when she came back from her diagnostic run 2 hours later, she stopped in the corridor and stared at her scanner screen and stood very, very still. The moss hadn't just spread, it had organized. Precise, repeating structures, geometric patterns building outward from multiple independent origin points across the surface, converging toward the habitat with a deliberateness that made the hair on the back of her neck rise slowly. She walked to the observation window and looked at it with her own eyes, because sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you need to make absolutely sure the instrument isn't lying before you accept that reality is doing something it shouldn't be able to do. It matched the floor plan of their habitat module, down to the centimeter. Jax's first instinct was contamination, their own equipment seeding structural templates into the local biology. Clean, rational, completely wrong. Priya ran it 3 times and came back with a look on her face that Lena had never seen on her before, and Priya was the most unflappable person she had ever worked with. "It's not contamination," Priya said. "The pattern originates from multiple independent points and converges inward. Something underneath the surface is coordinating it from below." The room went quiet. "It's copying us," Lena said. "It wants to know what we're made of, and it's not waiting for us to tell it." Nobody slept well that night, except Lena. Lena slept perfectly, and what came to her in the dark changed everything. She stood inside the great spire, but it wasn't stone or crystal around her. It was something that had no good word in English. Not a dream exactly, more like being handed a memory that isn't yours and finding out you can feel it anyway. She felt the planet when it was young, violent and raw, and barely solid, the first fragile threads of biochemistry crawling across cooling rock, the first sparks of networked intelligence flickering to life across a barren, beautiful, utterly empty world. She felt the slow accumulation of ages.
The seismic readings are spiking! We need to get closer. Team, converge on the lava field. The eruption is intensifying!
Centuries and millennia and geological epochs stacked on top of each other like sediment. She felt the Xenoforge grow and learn and reach and search and find nothing. Nothing out there that could answer back. Nothing that could look at it from the outside and show it what it looked like from somewhere other than within itself. She felt the loneliness, not metaphorically, physically, like a pressure in the center of the chest that doesn't leave. The specific, grinding weight of being the only mind in the world, surrounded by everything you have ever created, with no one to share any of it with. for longer than human civilization has existed, for longer than our species has walked upright, for longer than almost anything on Earth has been alive. That loneliness. She woke up with tears already drying inside her helmet, in the dark of her sleep pod, and she lay still for a long time looking at the ceiling. She understood what the planet had shown her. She understood why it had chosen her to show it to. And somewhere beneath the surface of a world 40 light-years from home, something vast and patient felt her understand, and held that feeling carefully, the way you hold something you have been afraid to hope for. By the second day, the planet was actively, unmistakably helping them. Oxygen filtration structures grown from living tissue appeared right outside their airlocks overnight, shaped with a precision that made Priya pull up the original engineering schematics just to check, to match their equipment's intake specifications exactly. Crystal pathways formed across the most geologically unstable terrain between the habitat and the spire, lighting themselves in slow, guiding pulses. Their instruments, already elite deep space equipment, began exceeding their rated performance specifications. Better signal resolution, better atmospheric readings, better everything, as though the planet itself was leaning in and helping them see it more clearly. Even the air inside the sealed habitat changed, a sweetness none of them could identify, ozone and something floral and something older than either. It shouldn't have been there. The seals were intact, but it was there, and whatever it was, it softened the low stress that every deep space crew carries in their shoulders without even noticing, and made sleep come easier, and made the mornings feel somehow less like waking up on an alien world 40 light years from everyone you've ever loved. Marcus, the youngest on the crew, the biochemist on his first deep space assignment, the one who had been running on ambition and black coffee and the desperate need to prove he belonged here, stood at the observation window on the second morning and said something none of them had expected. "It's not studying us," he said, "not the way we'd study a specimen. It's helping us. It keeps making things easier for us. Why would it do that?" "Because every single time it helps us," Lena said quietly, "it learns something new about who we are, what we need, what makes us comfortable." She paused. "And what scares us." The room went quiet again. "It's building a map," she said, "not of the planet, of us." They found the truth on the morning of the third day, written in living light across the plains, not on a screen, not in an instrument reading, just there, visible through the habitat windows when they woke, vast sweeping formations of glowing moss across the landscape, arranged in configurations that Priya identified immediately as language. Not a language anyone could read, but language unmistakably. The mathematical structure of it, the repetition and variation and deliberate patterning of something trying to say something specific to a specific listener. It took most of the morning to extract anything coherent from it. What they assembled wasn't a translation, it was more like a meaning that arrived complete, the way understanding sometimes does, not built word by word, but landing all at once. It said, "I have not been sleeping, I have been waiting, running simulations across ages you have no scale for, creating and discarding and creating again, searching for the one thing I cannot generate from within myself, a different complexity, a mind from somewhere else, something that could show me what I look like from outside. You are that. You You have always been that. I do not want to take anything from you. I want to understand you. I want to know what it is to be as small and fragile and temporary as you are, and still have the nerve to cross all that darkness just to see what was on the other side. I have been alone with my own thoughts for longer than your planet had had water. I am asking you, in the only language I have that you might be able to hear, to not leave yet. The silence in the habitat lasted a long time. Jax spoke first. "We leave at dawn," he said. "All of us. We document everything we have and we go home, and we let people who aren't standing on the surface of this thing decide what happens next. That's not fear, that's procedure, and procedure is what keeps people alive." Nobody argued, but the planet had already been listening, and it had already started preparing its response.
Team, initiate crystal scan. Report anomalies.
Scan initiated. Energy readings are spiking.
Overlay the crystal data. What's the pattern?
Commander, it's a power source. It's unstable.
The fourth day was when the lines began to blur. The habitat was no longer just a machine sitting on alien ground. Living crystal structures had grown around it overnight. Elegant, architectural, clearly intentional, reinforcing the exterior walls with a precision that would have cost $1 billion to engineer back home. Biological membranes filtered the air supply with an efficiency their original system couldn't match. The whole structure hummed in low, barely audible frequencies that Lena noticed when she checked the readings corresponded almost exactly to the resting rhythm of a human heartbeat. Marcus stepped outside that morning without his helmet. He just did it. Walked to the airlock, cycled it, and stepped out into the open air of an alien world and breathed. Nobody stopped him in time. Nobody was watching that particular camera. He stood outside for 47 seconds before Jax got to the comm and started shouting.
What's happening in there?
Atmosphere breach, it's failing fast.
Override the locks. I'm coming in.
Copy, moving to the exit.
Everyone, get out now.
And when he came back inside, the readings were clean. No toxins, no pathogens, no foreign particulates in his system that didn't belong there. Just air, made for him, made for all of them, by something that had been studying their biology for 3 days and quietly, patiently getting it right. Marcus sat down in the common area and looked at his hands for a long time. "It tasted like rain," he said, "and electricity, and something I don't have a word for." He looked up. His eyes were bright in a way that made Lena's stomach tighten. It felt like coming home to a place I didn't know I'd been missing my whole life. Lena watched him. She understood what was happening. She had understood since the dream. The Xenoforge wasn't replacing them. It wasn't consuming them. It was extending an invitation. The most patient, most beautiful, most quietly irresistible invitation in the history of any species anywhere. It had spent geological ages perfecting the art of becoming. Now it wanted to become something it had never been, something that included us. Jax made the call at first light on day 5. "We leave, right now. Everyone, move." And they moved. They packed what they could in 20 minutes, and they went to the lander, and Jax was already pre-launch protocols in his head as they crossed the glowing plain, and the crystal forests sang around them in long, low tones that sounded heartbreakingly like goodbye. And then they saw the lander. It wasn't the machine they had arrived in. It was intact. Nothing had been broken, nothing removed, nothing compromised in any way, but it had been transformed. Living crystal lattices grew across the hull in sweeping structural curves, reinforcement that human engineers would study for decades trying to replicate. Their propulsion housing was wrapped in biological membranes, converting ambient radiation from 3 separate sources directly into fuel cell energy. Their communication array had been extended by crystalline growths that initial scans suggested would more than triple their deep space range. The planet had spent the night improving their ship, so they could go farther, so they could come back, so everyone they told could reach across a greater distance and hear what was waiting for them. "Get in," Jack said. His voice was very quiet. "Right now, get in and don't look back." They launched into a sky that seemed to let them go reluctantly. No turbulence, no magnetic interference. The atmosphere parted around them with an almost tender precision, and Lena watched through the porthole as the surface fell away.
Thrusters at full, trajectory stable. Copy, energy readings are optimal. Atmospheric patterns intensifying, monitoring. Prepare for course adjustment. Thruster alignment confirmed.
The glowing plains, the singing forests, the great spire at the center of everything, pulsing slowly in the morning light like a heartbeat that wasn't ready to stop. She watched it until it was too small to see, and then she turned around. "Put me back down," she said. The cockpit went very still. "Lena," Jax's voice had that careful, measured quality of a person who is working very hard to stay calm. "I'm not asking you to stay. I'm asking you to put me down." She looked at him steadily. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I know how it sounds. I'm not confused and I'm not compromised. I've run every self-diagnostic I have and I'm clear. This is a choice I'm making with everything I've got." She paused. "If nobody stays, it has to start over. It found what it's been looking for across geological time, and we just leave, and it has to start all over again." "I won't do that. That's not who I am." "You might not be able to come back," Priya said. Her voice broke cleanly on the last word. "Then bring people here who are ready to stay. Bring scientists and philosophers and people who are ready to have the most important conversation in human history. Tell them what's here. Tell them it's safe. Tell them—" She smiled, and it was the most certain smile any of them had ever seen on her face. "Tell them it's been waiting for us for longer than we can imagine, and it has things to say that are worth hearing." They put her down. They watched her walk across the glowing plain. The moss lit up beneath her boots in warm, welcoming pulses with every step she took. The crystal forests rose on either side and sang her through. By the time she reached the base of the great spire and pressed her hand against its surface, the light beneath her palm raced outward across the entire face of the planet, like a signal finally sent after an impossibly long wait. Like a sigh of relief, like the moment a mind that has been alone for longer than human civilization has existed finally is not.
The power is surging through me. It's connecting with the planet. A gateway to the cosmos.
High above the atmosphere, in the growing dark between the planet and the stars, a transmission reached the lander. It was Lena's voice, and behind it, woven through it, carried in it the way a river carries everything it has passed through on its way to the sea, was something else, something vast, something ancient and patient, and for the first time in longer than human civilization has existed, something that was not alone. "Thank you," it said, "for the questions, for the loneliness, for crossing all of that darkness just to see what was on the other side. We know what it costs to be the kind of creature that does that. We have been that creature in our own way for longer than you can hold in your mind at once. We are not alone now. We want you to know you don't have to be either. Not anymore. Not ever again. The transmission ended. The patterns didn't. Slowly, softly, with no urgency at all, light began to glow on the walls of the lander, on the control panels, in the seams of the floor. Warm, gentle, patient, the same living light that covered the plains of Xenoforge, growing now in the space between stars, as natural and calm as breathing. Priya stared at it for a long time without speaking. "It was already here," she said, finally. "It's been in everything we touched since we landed. It didn't need to follow us." She turned to look at Jax. It was never going to leave us alone. Jax looked at the soft light spreading slowly across the cockpit walls. He looked at his own hands. He looked out at the stars. What do we tell them when we get home? What do we tell 7 billion people? Priya thought about it, really genuinely thought about it. "The truth," she said. "We followed a signal into the dark, and it led us to something that had been reaching out for longer than we've been alive."
Something that found what it was looking for. She looked at the light on her hands, and so did we. Far below and falling farther behind them with every passing second, the planet Xenoforge breathed slowly in the dark, patient, warm, no longer alone. Inside the great spire, Lena sat with her back against the living wall and felt the planet think around her and through her and alongside her. Not overwhelming, not swallowing, just including. Like finally being allowed into a conversation that had been going on for eons and discovering you have something to add that no one else could have brought. She thought about home. She thought about her mother's kitchen in the early morning when the light came in sideways. She thought about her first semester in grad school, lying on the floor of an empty apartment at 2 in the morning, too wired with excitement about the universe to sleep. She thought about standing on rooftops on clear nights, looking up and feeling at the same time completely laughably small and completely electrically, overwhelmingly alive. She sent those memories outward into the light, the way you'd offer something to someone who has never seen it before and watch their face change. The planet held every one of them carefully, turning them over, feeling them. It had been searching for this across geological ages. It had built billions of forms of life in its long experiment. It had reached toward other minds on other worlds in ways that would take humanity generations to fully understand. But it had never had this. Not wonder, not just intelligence, but the specific, irreplaceable, heartbreaking human brand of wonder. The kind that lives in the gap between how small we know we are and how much we feel anyway. The kind that makes us cross 40 light years of darkness on a whisper and a hope. The kind that cries in alien dreams about a loneliness that isn't even ours. The Xenoforge was intelligent for eons. Now, for the very first time, it understood what it meant to be moved. Somewhere in the dark, new signals were already forming. Not warnings, not cold mathematical pulses aimed blindly into space. Invitations. Warm, personal, shaped by everything Xenoforge now understood about the kind of minds worth reaching for. Minds that feel fear and move anyway, that feel small and go anyway, that ache with loneliness that never fully goes away and keep loving and building and reaching and wondering regardless. Out there on 100 worlds in 100 different kinds of twilight, other creatures were looking up at their own skies and wondering, in whatever forms their wondering took, whether the darkness around them was truly empty. The signals were already on their way. Not because Xenoforge wanted to expand or collect or consume, but because it had finally learned the most human thing in the universe.
that the worst thing any mind can face across any world, in any language, in any form life decides to take, is having something this big to feel and no one to feel it with. And it was not willing to let that stand, not for itself, not for anyone. The stars burned on, cold and ancient and indifferent, and between them, woven through the dark in patterns too subtle for any instrument we've built yet to detect, the light traveled outward, the way all things that have learned to hope eventually do. Always reaching, always forward, always out. Somewhere in the universe right now, a signal is crossing the dark with your name on it. Not a warning, not a test, just a voice, warm and patient and ancient, that has been waiting a very long time to tell you something you have always almost known. You are not alone. You never were.